Hello guys, happy new year. How are we? Nice to see you again, or lovely to meet you if you have never clicked on one of my videos before. Hi, how are we? Today's video is very self-explanatory. It is my monthly wrap-up. Today I'm going to be telling you all 13 books that I read in December and giving you my thoughts on them. You guys know how these videos work by now. Basically, I read 13 books in December. There were some good ones, there were some bad ones, and I'm just going to share all of my thoughts with you today. So let's just get straight into it. Let's not waste any time. The first few books I read in December, I actually had a full reading vlog on, but it is the Twisted series. So I read Twisted Love in November, so I talked about it in my November wrap up, but I read the rest of the series in December, had my full reading vlog. So we've got Twisted Games by Ana Huang, Twisted Hate, also by Ana Huang obviously, and Twisted Lies. I really enjoyed reading this series, so if you do want full thoughts on the whole series and every individual book, then I recommend clicking on that video and giving it a watch. But yeah, I read these three. First of all, Twisted Games. This became one of my favorite romances of all time. I rated this 5 out of 5 stars. This is basically about our two main characters, Bridget and Reese. Bridget is a princess of this country called Eldora. She really doesn't want to be queen. She has no interest in being like on the throne. However, when her brother abdicates for true love, because there's this law where the royals have to marry someone of nobility, Bridget finds herself all of a sudden the heir to the throne and has to prepare to be queen. Reese is her bodyguard, and so he's like protecting her from all of this stuff, but slowly they seem to fall in love. I really loved these characters. I thought they had a really beautiful love story, and I just rooted for them so much. Like Bridget and Reese's character development as well was so good, and I feel like, not gonna lie, Ana Huang kind of writes love interests that seem to all be very similar to each other. They all are a bit samey. I feel like Reese was the most distinctly different one, because he wasn't super possessive or like toxic. He was just a really good guy, and I really loved Bridget as well. Like, she was just so great and had such a strong sense of character, and I really loved her. If you're not interested in reading the series, I still recommend at least reading this one. Obviously, we now have Twisted Hate by Ana Huang. I ended up rating this 4 out of 5 stars. This is enemies to lovers between our two main characters, Josh and Jules. Jules is a lawyer, Josh is a doctor. They absolutely like hate each other, and then they have this like friends with benefits relationship, and then it turns into something more, and we learn a lot about Jules's really dark backstory as well, and how some demons from the past are like coming, and she has to kind of deal with that while also grappling with her like feelings of hatred slash attraction to Josh. I rated this 4 out of 5 stars because I really liked our main characters. I thought they were really fun, and I think this was a really well done enemies to lovers. Like, I feel like they didn't actually end up having feelings for each other until very late in the book, which is what I like with an enemies to lovers. You know, I want that tension. However, I think the point of conflict and the way that Josh acted with the point of conflict was really disgusting and a little bit unforgivable. Like, just the way he spoke to Jules was really horrible, and the way he kind of punished her for lying to him, which, yes, she should not have lied to him, and I feel like the conflict could have been resolved like so easily, but I still just don't agree with how Josh treated her. However, it was a fun enemies to lovers. I still rated it 4 out of 5 stars. I'm just very nitpicky with the books that I enjoy. Anyways, 4 out of 5 stars. It was very fun. And then finally, Twisted Lies by Ana Huang. I rated this 3 out of 5 stars. I think it was fun, but by this stage, I had like, when reading this, I had read so many books in this universe first. I had read the first 3 books kind of in succession, and by this one I was kind of a little bit bored, especially when the books do become really similar. Like, the sex scenes and the smut are like pretty much identical throughout the entire series, and it's like, okay, surely not every single one of these female characters in this friend group would have sex the exact same way, and surely not every single one of their boyfriends would also have sex the exact same way. Do you know what I mean? Like, it just felt like a little bit samey, and I feel like Christian, the main character in here, was identical to Alex, who is the male love interest in the first book. Basically, we follow our main characters, Stella and Christian. Stella is a social media influencer, and she decides to fake date Christian because she wants to try and reach 1 million followers on Instagram so she can like score this publicity deal with this fashion company. Yeah, and then Christian's like her fake boyfriend, but then there's also like a stalker situation. I don't know, this is a really long book, so there was a lot going on in here. I definitely think this was the weakest of the 4, which is why I gave it 3 out of 5 stars, although I think that's kind of a fairly unpopular opinion because I know that this is a lot of people's favorites. But my ride or die is still Twisted Games. After the Twisted series, I read Every Summer After by Carly Fortune. I gave this 2 out of 5 stars. This is basically like a epic love story, childhood friends to lovers, romance, along with like a second chance romance going on as well. Basically, we follow our main character, Percy. She spent every summer growing up in this lake house, and there she met this boy called Sam and his older brother Charlie, who lived in that neighborhood in that little beach town. They end up having this like epic love story that spans 5 years. There ends up being something that causes them to break up, and then all of a sudden Sam and Charlie's mother dies like 10 years later or something, and so Percy goes back to that place for the funeral and kind of has a whole weekend with these brothers again, and they really kind of like dive into why everything ended. I think what I didn't love about this is that like it's supposed to be an adult novel, however it's mostly told from the perspective of like teenagers, so I really wasn't expecting that. It just felt very young, and also it's literally identical to Love in Other Words by Christina Lauren. Like it's the same book except with a different plot twist. I feel like the plot twist in this one is better than the one in Love in Other Words, because the Love in Other Words one made me feel really uncomfortable. This one is still kind of uncomfortable, but not like to the same level. But yeah, they were identical novels. And then in the author's note at the end, Carly Fortune literally says that Christina Lauren are like some of her biggest writing inspirations, and I'm like, okay, so you know Love in Other Words exists and you just wrote the same book? Like, I don't know, it's literally identical, and I didn't love that book in the first place, so why would I then go and love this one? I don't know, it just felt very immature, and I'm aware that it's a debut novel, but I didn't love it. I also just did not care for the characters. They were very like two-dimensional. I will say that I think Carly Fortune does a really good job at creating the atmosphere of this like lake house in Canada. Like that was really fun. I really did feel like I was transported to the lakeside, so I really did love that aspect, and I think Carly Fortune is really talented at creating an atmosphere. I just want her to write her own story next time. Everyone is always saying like, oh, it's really similar to this book, so if you like this book you'll like this one, because it's the same. Because it's literally the same. After that, I read The Deal by Elle Kennedy. This was a reread for me, and I read it for my Patreon series read along. Basically from December till August, we are reading the off-campus Embraer U series, 1 book each month, and this was our first book to start off that series read along, and it was so fun. The first time I read this, I rated it 3 out of 5 stars because this was one of my first forays into the romance genre, whereas upon reread, and now that I've read so many more romances, I actually ended up rating this 4 out of 5 stars. I do think there are still some really cringy lines. I really don't like how Garrett talks about women at the beginning of the book, but I feel like he has really strong character development, which I really enjoy and appreciate, and I think Elle Kennedy is a very talented writer. Also, sorry, I didn't even tell you what this is about. Basically, this is a new adult college romance. Garrett is the captain of the hockey team. Hannah is this like music student. She basically was the only person in this one class to pass this test. The rest of the class completely failed, including Garrett, but they are offered a retest or a re-examination, and Garrett has to pass, otherwise he gets kicked off the hockey team. So he sees that Hannah passes and like basically tries to get him to tutor her. They end up fake dating because Hannah has this crush on this other guy, and Garrett's like, if you fake date me, he will want you. You know, it's that sort of vibe. They end up fake dating and falling in love, and oh, I just really like it. I think it's just a really fun book, and this is a really just strong start to the story. I feel like their relationship dynamic, you know, I really buy their chemistry. I buy their falling in love process. Like, I like that it doesn't just happen overnight. I like that they kind of become friends first and then fall in love. It's just so sweet, and I do feel like this book is very influential on so many other like new adult college romances that we see. I think this kind of paved the way for some of the sports romances that we're seeing these days as well. But yeah, I really like this, and I cannot wait to reread the rest of the off-campus series for my Patreon. It's just such a fun time, and it's so good to just read something like easy and fun and a bit cheesy along with like a bunch of other people. So yeah, I'm really glad that I read this one. Then I read a book on my Kindle called The Dead Romantics by Ashley Poston. For something that is like just over 300 pages, this took me like 3 weeks to finish. I swear to God, I don't know why. It's such an easy novel, but it took me so long. Basically, this book is about a ghostwriter. Her name is Florence, and she is the ghostwriter for this really famous like romance novelist. Her dad ends up passing away, so she has to go back to her hometown, and when she's there is a knock on her door, and it happens to be her brand new editor, who is this really sexy guy called Benji, and he is a ghost because Florence can also like speak to ghosts. It's something that is passed down through her family. It's very random. She ends up like grieving her father while also kind of having the company of Benji's ghost to do that, and then they end up falling in love. So it's really heartbreaking. I was really sad at a few times reading this book because obviously we're dealing so much with death. It was definitely a difficult read. I thought it was really unique and really fun. I rated it 3 out of 5 stars because there were a few times where I was quite bored, but I'm really excited to see what this author does now because I believe this is a debut novel. But yeah, I don't know, I just thought it was really sweet, really fun. I really liked our main character's journey, but one thing that bothered me is there was so much name dropping from our main character because yes, she is a romance novelist, so I kind of feel like our main character and also our author was name dropping all of these like romance novels and romance authors. Like there was a lot of reference to Christina Lauren. There was literally one reference to The Hating Game, which is probably my least favorite romance book of all time. So I was a bit like, oh, okay. But yeah, I don't know, it was still really fun and I definitely recommend it to people if they haven't checked it out yet, if you want like a romance book with a bit of like a more interesting twist. The next book I read in December was Us Against You by Frederick Buckman. This is the second book in the Beartown series, and Frederick Buckman has fast become one of my favorite authors because I read 2 other books by him this year, the first Beartown novel and Anxious People, and they were both 5 stars. This was a 4-star read, but I still really enjoyed it nonetheless, and Frederick Buckman still is like an absolute favorite author of mine now. Basically, the first Beartown novel is about this small hockey town in Sweden. It's a town where hockey is like everything, sports is everything. And so there's obviously this hierarchy in the town of like sports players and people involved in hockey and then like everyone else. Basically, there is a sexual assault that happens in Beartown from one of the star hockey players, and then the entire town is rocked by this tragedy. The town is completely divided and a lot of like the morals of the town are brought into question. We follow a huge cast of characters, and this book kind of just follows everyone from the first novel, minus like one of the most disgusting characters in the first novel, and the aftermath of everything that went down in the first book. The reason why I gave this 4 stars instead of the 5 that the first book got is I feel like this one was definitely more like politics and business heavy, whereas the first one was a lot more about human emotions, and this one was definitely more about like, okay, like logistics of how the town is going to function now, and I just preferred the more human side of the first book. However, this still had so much heart and our characters still went through so much. There was definitely a point in this book where I absolutely sobbed because the first book was heartbreaking, the second book also is, but I really loved seeing where a lot of our characters ended up, and I wish we would have had more of those characters. I just feel like because there's such a huge cast, Frederick Buckman is kind of spread thin with where to like put his attention, and there were some people that I feel like got more attention than others that I would have preferred, but this is such like a personal subjective response to this novel, so I completely know that that is like my own thing. I did really love this though. I am really excited to read The Winners, which is the 3rd and final installment in this series, hopefully next year. And yeah, I just really recommend this series to everyone. It is such a great book, and I feel like Frederick Buckman is just such a good writer, can write about really heartbreaking things while still being like very poetic, but still really easy to read. It's really hard to explain. I feel like Frederick Buckman's writing is exactly how I would sum up my taste in like prose and writing style. But yeah, so I rated this 4 out of 5 stars. Then I read another book on my Kindle, Sometimes I Lie by Alice Feeney. I gave this 2 out of 5 stars. This is a thriller about our main character who is in a coma. However, she is still very conscious. She can hear what is going on around her in her hospital room, but she has a very messy and patchy like memory of the past like week. And so it's told in 2 different timelines. We get her perspective from like now in a coma, and then also her perspective of like the week leading up to this event. This book is also set around Christmas, so I feel like this was a very appropriate time for me to read it. However, I kind of wish I didn't read it at all because it wasn't great. First of all, going in, I did not know that there was going to be a very graphic and disgusting rape scene. It kind of came out of nowhere, and I was like, okay, that's not for me. However, that's not why I gave it 2 stars. I feel like it was super messy. There was a lot of fat shaming, like a lot of fat shaming, and I just feel like that was really uncomfortable to read about. Like I didn't want to. And it was also incredibly predictable. Like there were so many different things that were going on, and I'm like, okay, I can pinpoint exactly what's going to happen with these 3 different storylines. Oh yeah, that's right, because there was also a 3rd timeline where we're following like diary entries from childhood. It was messy and there was just too much. Yeah, I could predict all of the plot twists, but not in a satisfying way, just in like a, oh, this would be the most obvious thing to happen, and it did. And then the ending was really silly and really out of character and just not a great ending. Like I felt like it was incredibly cheap. I I did talk about this in one of my weekly reading vlogs, so I don't really want to talk about it again because I did not like it, and I just want to stay away from the negativity. That's what we're going to do in 2023, is we're going to try and be more positive. We'll see how long that lasts. Next, I read The X Talk by Rachel Lynn Solomon. This is a rom-com, and I ended up giving this 3 out of 5 stars. Basically, we follow our two main characters. They both work in public radio, and because the radio station is kind of dying, our main character, Shay, comes up with the idea to do this new radio show called The X Talk, where it's basically like two exes giving relationship advice. However, where do you find two exes? That's where our main characters, Shay and Dominic, come in, and they pretend to be exes while giving relationship advice, and then they like fall in love in the process. I feel like there was just a lot of missed opportunities here. I also feel like one of the biggest missed opportunities is that Shay keeps talking about how it's really unfair that there's so much misogyny in the workplace, which is completely fair enough, babe. Like, I totally get it, like men getting opportunities over her, 100%. However, our male main character is Korean, and there's like no discussion about how white men would get the opportunity over POC men, and I feel like that was just a missed opportunity. Like, it didn't have to be like a whole thing, but it would be really cool if the characters had just like one conversation about that, and they just never did. She keeps shitting on him for getting opportunities over her, but like, wouldn't it have been kind of all good for him to be like, well, also remember, you're white and I'm POC, like you're automatically also going to get more opportunities than me, and I'm not the enemy, the white man is the enemy. I don't know. I feel like it could have been done a little bit better. And then also the third act conflict, there was just like so many breakups, and I was like, okay, please. But it was still a really solid rom-com, and I'm really excited to see what Rachel Lynn Solomon does with her next adult romance novel, because I believe this is her first adult romance novel. She's only done YA before this. But yeah, it was fun, and I'm excited to read more. And then the last 4 books I read in my 48-hour readathon, which is going to be coming out very soon. So I'm going to talk very briefly about these, because you will get full thoughts on them in a video coming out very shortly. But first of all, I read Good Girl Bad Blood by Holly Jackson. This is the second book in the A Good Girl's Guide to Murder series, and this is a YA mystery. I thought this was so much fun. This basically follows our main character Pip and her boyfriend Ravi, and they're basically solving another mystery. One of her friend's older brothers goes missing, and they're just basically trying to figure out where he is because the police like do not give a shit. There are so many twists and turns in here, and I feel like Holly Jackson is just a very talented author. I cannot wait to read the final installment in this series, and I'm really hoping that she does like a spin-off series or she extends it, because it needs to be longer than a trilogy. Like, I just want more of Pip solving mysteries. It's so much fun, and I really have nothing bad to say about it. So yeah, this was 4 out of 5 stars. Then I read Idle Burning by Rin Usami. This is a short novella about a girl who's obsessed with this one member in this Japanese boy band. The member of this boy band ends up like punching someone publicly, and so he's now under a lot of scrutiny, and all of these fans are like canceling him and stuff, and our main character is kind of watching her idol's life fall apart while her own life falls apart in tandem. It's a really interesting story about parasocial relationships and fandom culture, and how cancel culture can affect not just the person getting cancelled, but like other people around them. I don't know, it was a really interesting novel. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. I kind of wish it was a full-length novel and not just a novella, because I feel like it didn't really go deeper. It had really interesting themes, and I wanted our author to kind of expand on them a little bit, because I feel like it was all quite surface level. I'm excited to read more of this author, and I feel like this was a really nice little book. Well, it was actually quite depressing, but I feel like it was a good time for like just reading it in the span of like an hour. I also read another book on my Kindle, which was Gills by Raven Kennedy. This is the first book in the Plated Prisoners series, and it is a fantasy. It's described as a fantasy romance, however there is zero semblance of romance in this first novel, which I think is why I liked it so much. I don't know. I really like my fantasy to have no romance in it. I really like it when it's just like solid fantasy. This is a retelling of the myth of King Midas, where everything he touches turns to gold. Our main character has been gold touched, so she has full gold skin, gold hair, gold clothes, and she is kind of become this spoil of war in this war between kings. I'm really excited to see where this story goes. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars, which is like one of the highest ratings I've given a fantasy novel since like the Poppy War, which is really, that was like a long time ago. That was back in like 2020. But yeah, I'm really excited to read the rest of the series. I bought the full series recently, and I know that the final installment, the 5th and final book, is coming out in June this year. I'm really excited to read these. I think they were really well done, and the character development that our main character went through, so good. So yeah, I'm excited to continue. And then this feels so appropriate, the last book of December and the last book of 2022. The Secret History, my favorite book of all time. So I read this for my Patreon book club pick. So I did a full reading vlog and live show discussion on this book over on my Patreon. And this was a reread. This was like my 7th or 8th reread of this book because I first read this when I was 15 years old and I have not gone back. It has still been my favorite book since then. I obviously rated it 5 out of 5 stars. If you watch my videos regularly, like there's no point explaining this because you guys know what it's about. It's about a group of college students who end up murdering a person, and it's so good. And I think what people don't realize is that it's not this like dark, serious, dark academia novel that everyone paints it as. And I feel like the people who see it like that and the people who also romanticize it and romanticize the classical themes and the dark academia aesthetic of it are completely missing the point, because it's making fun of those things. It is satire, it is a comedy. Whenever I see Pinterest boards, and I have fallen victim to making one of those Pinterest boards, but whenever I see Pinterest boards of people like romanticizing the shit out of this book and being like, oh my god, it's just so aesthetic, you are Richard. Like, you've missed the point. I'm sorry, I'm being so mean right now, but it's just fantastic. I really love it. It was just such a good reread. Obviously, like all my annotations, most of them are literally just moments that I find fucking hilarious, because if you go into it being like this is a comedy, you'll get it. You'll completely get it. I just feel so appropriate to end the month and 2022 with this novel, and I'm so happy that I got to reread it again with a bunch of other people. Those are all the books that I read in December. Thank you so much for watching. Please let me know down below what your favorite book of December was. I love getting recommendations from people, so if you read any good books in the month, please let me know what they were. I also have quite a few end of year videos coming out very soon, so I have like all the books I read in 2022. I have my best books of 2022, my worst ones. I have so many videos like that coming out, so I hope you are looking forward to those. Also, another reminder that all my socials are linked down below as always, along with my Patreon. So if you want 3 extra videos from me a month and 3 extra live shows and 2 separate book clubs, I would really love it if you would consider joining, because we have so much fun on there. But yeah, that's everything. Thank you so much for watching. Happy New Year. I'm so excited for another year of videos with you guys and another year of reading, and I will see you very soon in another video.